Hello, 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 hello. How are you? How are you? How are you? I was meant to go somewhere. Here was A, B, C, News, Australia, 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 Australia. Am I in the right place or what? Okay, Australia, Australia.
China's Antarctic bases within Australia's claim are going unchecked, ABC News. Flying high in the skies above Antarctica's ice in late 2016, the former head of the Australian Antarctic Division was on a spectacular mission. The Antarctic Treaty System bars military activity or mineral exploration, and it is up to scientists like Nicholas Gales to ensure their neighbors are doing as they should. His goal that day was to complete the first inspection of the remote American base at the South Pole by a nation, unaided by the Americans themselves. We flew in under our own resources with one of our chartered ski-equipped aircraft, a Basler, he told a parliamentary committee less than a year later. We spent 2 days at the station undertaking that full inspection and then came out through coastal US station, McMurdo on the way out. This was the only inspection of another station Australia has undertaken in the past 8 years. While getting to the South Pole was an achievement, of perhaps greater significance was the base drive Gales didn't visit. We were going to undertake an inspection of another country on the way through, one of the Chinese bases. But it was not operating from there during that summer. All up, China's most audaciously located station at the high point of Antarctica's vast ice sheet at the heart of Australian Antarctic territory has seen 10 summers. This is a decade marked by incredible expansion of Chinese activity. Yet this station, as well as one another, Chinese base within Australia's claim, have never been inspected. Many are saying it's time for a checkup. The Southern Ocean is the only thing between Australia and Antarctica. Beyond it, on the southern continent, 42% of land has been claimed by Australia as its sovereign territory. Australia has 3 research stations on the Antarctic coast. But it's getting crowded. There are close to 80 separate facilities open in Antarctica, with more under construction. China is currently building its 5th station, even though it has yet to secure environmental approval for it. In the past decade it has established Kunlun and Taishan stations. These mysterious outposts are deep in the continent's interior within Australia's claim. Imagery, Google Earth. Expanding international activity in Antarctica and the need to protect claims to sovereignty mean Australia must do more down south. According to prominent polar researchers, the continent is governed by international law banning military activity or China's Antarctic bases within Australia's claim are going unchecked, ABC News. Flying high in the skies above Antarctica's ice in late 2016, the former head of the Australian Antarctic Division was on a spectacular mission. The Antarctic Treaty System bars military activity or mineral exploration, and it is up to scientists like Nicholas Gales to ensure their neighbors are doing as they should. His goal that day was to complete the first inspection of the remote American base at the South Pole by a nation, unaided by the Americans themselves. We flew in under our own resources with one of our chartered ski-equipped aircraft, a Basler, he told a parliamentary committee less than a year later. We spent 2 days at the station undertaking that full inspection and then came out through coastal US station, McMurdo on the way out. This was the only inspection of another station Australia has undertaken in the past 8 years. While getting to the South Pole was an achievement, of perhaps greater significance was the base drive Gales didn't visit. We were going to undertake an inspection of another country on the way through one of the Chinese bases. But it was not operating from there during that summer. All up, China's most audaciously located station at the high point of Antarctica's vast ice sheet at the heart of Australian Antarctic territory has seen 10 summers. This is a decade marked by incredible expansion of Chinese activity. Yet this station, as well as one another Chinese base within Australia's claim, have never been inspected. Many are saying it's time for a checkup. The Southern Ocean is the only thing between Australia and Antarctica. Beyond it, on the southern continent, 42% of land has been claimed by Australia as its sovereign territory. Australia has 3 research stations on the Antarctic coast. But it's getting crowded. There are close to 80 separate facilities open in Antarctica, with more under construction. China is currently building its 5th station, even though it has yet to secure environmental approval for it. In the past decade it has established Kunlun and Taishan stations. These mysterious outposts are deep in the continent's interior within Australia's claim. Imagery, Google Earth. Expanding international activity in Antarctica and the need to protect claims to sovereignty mean Australia must do more down south. According to prominent polar researchers, the continent is governed by international law banning military activity or mineral exploration and freezing territorial claims, for now. Anne-Marie Brady from the University of Canterbury believes that hasn't stopped countries jostling for position and preparing for a time when this arrangement changes. Countries participate in Antarctic treaty governance, but you can see in many instances backup plans and contingency plans that countries are engaging in. Anas Don Rothwell, an international law expert, warns Australia's claim is at risk by inaction. If we don't effectively seek to manage that claim and exercise our sovereignty over that claim, well, then others will perceive some level of weakness in terms of Australia's position, he said. They might seek to exploit that weakness into the future. Though they note other nations, such as Russia and the United States, have at times tested treaty arrangements. Both Professor Brady and Professor Rothwell harbor specific concerns over China's activity in Antarctica. China is active all across this sector within East Antarctica, quite a sizable chunk of what Australia calls the Australian Antarctic Territory, Professor Brady said. Professor Rothwell is wary of China's commitment to the treaty given its record in the South China Sea. I think there's always that concern that given China's position on some areas of international law, is China perhaps preparing itself to make some radically alternative arguments into the future, which would not certainly be in Australia's interests, he said. Investigating China's bases. Kunlun was established in 2009, and is one of continent's most isolated stations. Taishan was set up 5 years later. China is expanding its military and modernizing its military, and the Arctic and Antarctic have an important part to play in that, Professor Brady said. I'm talking in particular about the rollout of China's GNS Global Navigation Satellite system, which is called BeiDou. And BeiDou is a rival to the US-led system GPS. New Zealand's Strategic Defence Policy Statement issued last year noted the difficulty in distinguishing between allowed and prohibited activities under the treaty could be used by states seeking to carry out a range of military activities. Why this is all important is because of the GPS systems of China, Russia and the US. In a time of war, they become really crucial. They're used for missile timing and positioning, Professor Brady said. An inspection of one of these bases costs $500,000, according Antarctic Division estimates. Australia's annual Antarctic budget is close to 400 times that, and a new runway, icebreaker ship and more infrastructure are in the works. But despite growing international activity by China and other nations, inspections have not been prioritized. Drive Gale's 2016 visit to the American South Pole base is the only time an Australian team has inspected a base since 2011. In recent decades, Australia abandoned its capability to traverse into the interior of the continent in order to focus on shipping and coastal activity. That was a point highlighted by last year's Parliamentary Committee report, which called on a resumption of inspections in the coming Antarctic summer. In the short time since the report was delivered, China continued construction in Antarctica. Its fifth base just outside the Australian claim in the Ross Sea is being established. An artist's depiction of the base, provided by China as part of its assessment of environmental risks, is at the top of the article. And significant work has been undertaken at the Taishan Station, midway between the coast and Kunlun Station. This satellite image, taken in January, shows massive expansion of the Taishan base. A researcher with experience in Antarctic satellite imagery helped identify some of the infrastructure. They wish to remain anonymous given the political sensitivities within Australia's Antarctic program. There was no sign of satellite communications infrastructure. Instead, they described an unconventional setup with several antennae around the base. Although Taishan expansion had been planned, this researcher questioned the activity given the base acts partly as a relay point between its coastal station and its Kunlun base further inland. Imagery, digital globe. Given how far south it is, Kunlun is rarely captured by satellite imagery. But what imagery is available shows significant expansion between 2010 and 2017. Liberal MP Julian Leeser, who sat on the recent parliamentary inquiry into Antarctica, wants inspections to resume this summer. Australians want Antarctica to be a place where there's no military activity, no mining, and we maintain its environmental significance, he said. The best way to ensure everyone is abiding by the treaty is to conduct more inspections than what we are currently doing. It is also clear that Washington is increasingly anxious about China's ambitions in the territory and would like to see Australia do more to monitor Beijing's activities. During the parliamentary hearings, Drysdale admitted that Australia was doing as many as it could within its operational capacity at the moment. He maintained that cooperation with China has been good for Australian science, but he also revealed he would want the capability to undertake treaty inspections a little more regularly. For Professor Rothwell, the Antarctic Treaty is creaking as it reaches its 60th birthday. We've now got a proliferation of states involved in Antarctica with a proliferation of scientific bases and stations, he said. And that's raised a real issue in terms of capacity, in terms of the ability of states to keep tabs on each other. The costs involved in terms of scientific inspection. Drysdale has since retired. ABC sought an interview with his replacement at the Antarctic Division, Kim Ellis, former head of the Sydney Botanic Gardens. But he declined. In a video produced by the Antarctic Division marking his arrival in February, Mr. Ellis said that there is going to have to a significant element of change in the division going forward. An Antarctic Division spokesperson maintains that Australia conducts inspections regularly. The sun will set at Australia's Davis Station for 6 weeks at the end of May. Australia's 2019-20 Antarctic season is set to formally commence in November. Out of sight, but not of mind. More Australians visit Antarctica each year than people from more than any other country except China and the US. But given the cost, the numbers are still quite small, around 5,000 visitors. 10 times that many are expected to visit an exhibition currently being held at the National Museum, offering a virtual reality tour of the southern continent. Tina Brandt from the museum said visitors have been moved by the film, which emphasizes the value of Antarctica to science. We have had some people who have been moved to tears by what they have seen, she said. Australia has a long history of exploration and now research there, and I think people are just generally interested in it. Canberra resident Don Gill believes Antarctica should not be viewed as a place to exploit or develop. I don't know much about other nations' motives, but it's important to preserve that idea of Antarctica as a precious place, almost like a big park, he said. Another visitor, Chinese national Zheng Mingying, said it was important for Australia and China to be active down there together. We all live in this earth. We are a whole family in this earth, so we all have a responsibility to protect it. Credits: Design and illustration, Emma McCann. Satellite images provided by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Odyssey format by Obscene News Story Lab.
Australia. This one is Israel company denies. This one's an Australian one, isn't it? Australiano. How do we put it there?
Israeli company denies security rumors as defense removes multi-billion-dollar technology and quarantines Army its systems. ABC News. Defense has begun stripping Israeli-developed technology from Army equipment because of fears it could be used to harvest sensitive data from military hardware and systems. Key points. The Army has ordered Israeli-developed technology be removed from certain equipment by the middle of May. Elbit Systems of Australia strongly rejects security rumors connected to its multi-billion-dollar product. Military sources say defense fears the Elbit technology could compromise sensitive military data. The company in question, Elbit Systems of Australia, has strongly rejected what it claims are security rumors connected to its multi-billion-dollar battle management system BMS. However, the ABC can reveal Army headquarters last month issued a directive ordering defense to cease use of the Elbit BMS, Command and Control BMS C2, in preparation for a replacement system. The employment of the BMS C2 system version 7.1 within Army's preparedness environment is to cease no later than May 15, 2021, the order states. Military sources have told the ABC that defense believes the Elbit technology may compromise sensitive data, triggering a directive that it not be configured or accessed on certain Army systems. Elbit's BMS, introduced a decade ago, allowed Army commanders to replace maps and analog radios with advanced digital encrypted technology and networks to better coordinate their units in the field and to protect classified information. Army's directive last month also demanded items such as USB memory sticks and software be withdrawn from issue to users and consolidated and quarantined by Signal support staff. Defense is to cease use of the BMS C2 in accordance with timings in order to prepare for the transition to an interim battle management system capability. In a statement, Elbit Systems of Australia Managing Director, retired Major General Paul McLaughlin, strongly rejected suggestions the company's product posed any risk. Elbit Systems of Australia strongly refutes the security rumors raised in recent media articles, Major General McLaughlin said. Elbit Systems of Australia utilizes secure software development processes in collaboration with the Department of Defence, including the provision of all source code. Major General McLaughlin added, Elbit Systems of Australia will continue to work closely with the Australian Defence Force to deliver its network capability. Requirements. The Defence Department and federal government are yet to comment on the decision to stop using Elbit equipment, which has begun to receive significant media attention in Israel.
I like to say something. The world, planet Earth, is corrupted on something like NATO or UN because they are forcing others to follow them to some leadership to a war that has been created by them and others. That country is in war, so they gotta go and stop that war, or their providers to stop that cyber attack or other system intermedia to protect the earth from killing itself. It can be not killing itself, or YouTube, Facebook, or any other place where cyber or anything, or you can't go there, you can't do this, you can't be there. We need to stop this nonsense that we do not have power and we cannot stop this. We cannot stop that. Why is there a war there? Why aren't the NATO, UN, or anyone in the border to say, oi, oi, yo, what are you doing? What are you doing? Oi, stop bombing them, stop shooting at them, stop doing things. So go to the border. Go to the border. Why aren't you in the border of Mexico? Why aren't you on the border of Chile? Why aren't you on the border of Russia with Ukraine? Why aren't you in the border of Palestinian and Israel? Why aren't you there do that? Whatever. It's no good, man. We're killing each other.
Israel-Gaza war updates. Gaza faces widespread hunger as winter approaches. Aid organization warns as it happened, ABC News. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to wrap up today's live coverage of developments in Israel and Gaza here. This story will continue to be updated with the latest developments. Here's a rundown of some of today's key events. Pro-Palestinian demonstrators gather outside the ABC's Sydney headquarters. Reporting by Danuta Kozaki. About 100 pro-Palestinian demonstrators have held a small protest outside the Sydney headquarters of the ABC. The protesters are calling for a ceasefire in Gaza and demand a stop to what they say is the complicity of the Australian media with what is going on in Gaza. Organizer Yasmin Johnson said she was from Sydney University's Students for Palestine group. We are outside the ABC today because the position the ABC has taken on Israel's side when they are massacring tens of thousands of Palestinians, she said. Anyone with a humanitarian bone in their body should oppose. The majority of the protesters dispersed after about an hour and a half, with a handful remaining outside the building by 6:30 p.m. Unprecedented level of settler violence. Israeli human rights advocate on West Bank tensions. West Bank resident Sabi El-Shalalda says his home was burned to the ground by an armed gang of Israeli settlers 2 weeks ago. We tried to get away and surrendered our homes, he says. They followed us holding sticks, axes and weapons. Public Outreach Director for Israeli Human Rights Group Beatson Roy Yellen says the incident is one of a really frightening increase in West Bank settler violence against Palestinians. What we're seeing is unprecedented level of settler violence, Mr. Yellen says. The levels had already gone up before October 7th. But now it's widespread all over the West Bank. Mr. Yellen says examples of settler violence include destroying farmland by uprooting Palestinian olive trees, burning property and violent attacks. But South African Israeli settler James Silberstein denies widespread violence. If there are some very rare instances of Jewish settlers who might attack Arabs, that is definitely the extreme exception, he says. Listen to the full story here. More regions will be targeted in Gaza, IDF Chief of Staff. The Israel Defense Forces Chief of Staff says the military will target more and more regions within the Gaza Strip as the war continues. In a video translated and released by the IDF, Herzi Halevi tells soldiers, Israel is close to dismantling the military system that was present in the northern Gaza Strip. He goes on to say the IDF will continue its operation without specifying in what areas. As far as we are concerned, more and more regions will be targeted, systematically eliminating commanding officers and eliminating operatives, and eradicating the infrastructure. He then calls on the soldiers to learn from the past 3 weeks and do it even better. Israel had been telling civilians in northern Gaza to flee southward, as it continues its ground invasion, but there has also been airstrikes in the south. Civilians in southern Gaza had also been told to evacuate and head to known shelters by the IDF via leaflet drops. Victorian councillor claims she has been gagged on ceasefire motion. Reporting by Harrison Tippett in Geelong. A Victorian councillor claims she has been gagged by unelected officials from putting forward a motion asking the council to call for a ceasefire in the Israel-Gaza war, saying there was an undeclared political agenda behind the decision. City of Greater Geelong councillor Sarah Hathaway, who is a member of the Socialist Alliance, claimed the motion had been rejected as it may have been prejudicial, which she interpreted as meaning it may put council staff, councillors and the community at risk, and could incite demonstrations in the city. I just think it's so undemocratic, she said. Here is the most pressing issue of the day. And this council is not allowed to talk about that. Frankly, I think there is an undeclared political agenda here. Not so long ago, this council lit up City Hall in Ukrainian flag colors and made very supportive statements in regards to the national rights of Ukrainians under Russian invasion. At no time was there any suggestion that this would lead to community violence. Yet when I and another councillor who put up a different but similar motion to discuss what is happening in the Israel-Gaza conflict just as Canterbury, Bankstown Council in Sydney and Merrick Council in Melbourne have done, we're ruled out of order. Don't the concerns and anguish of people in my ward, many of whom are Palestinians, Muslims and refugees, matter? Why even have council elections when we can't raise issues like this? Who are actually in charge here, elected councillors or unelected officials? In a statement, City of Greater Geelong, Mayor Trent Sullivan said the chief executive has made a decision based on council governance rules, which I understand and support. We are all horrified by what is occurring in Israel and Palestine and want to see an end to the suffering as soon as possible, Cr Sullivan said. We know this is a distressing time for many members of the Greater Geelong community, especially those with ties to the region. There are other options being explored to acknowledge the devastation occurring in the Middle East. Cr Hathaway's comments come following multiple pro-Palestine demonstrations in Geelong in recent weeks, including two events targeting the local offices of Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles. On Wednesday, a row of fake bodies wrapped in white sheets covered in fake blood stains were lined up in front of one of Mr. Marles's two Geelong offices. On November 1st, dozens of protesters staged a peaceful sit-in at Mr. Marles's other local office, where 5 chained themselves to a ladder or trolley. 2,000 shoes laid out in memory of killed Palestinians. Demonstrators in South Korea's Seoul have laid out thousands of shoes in tribute to the Palestinians killed in Israel's bombardment of Gaza. The vigil also called for a ceasefire in Gaza. Body of EDF soldier retrieved from Gaza. The Israeli military says it has retrieved the body of Corporal Noah Marciano, who was abducted on October 7, from a structure adjacent to Al Shifa Hospital. On Tuesday, it confirmed the death of the soldier after Hamas issued a video of her live, followed by images of what the group said was her body after she was killed in an Israeli strike. The EDF has now said her body was returned to Israeli territory on Thursday, where it was identified by medical and rabbinate personnel before informing her family. Reporting with Reuters. Thousands of bodies lie buried in rubble in Gaza. Families dig to retrieve them, often by hand. Every day, hundreds of people claw through tons of rubble with shovels and iron bars and their beret hands. They are looking for the bodies of their children or their parents. Officials in Gaza say they don't have the equipment, manpower or fuel to search properly for the living, let alone the dead. Omar Daroui and his neighbors have spent weeks searching the ruins of a pair of 4-story houses in central Gaza. 45 people lived in the homes, 32 were killed. In the first days after the attack, 27 bodies were recovered. The 5 still missing are Mr. Daroui's cousins. The situation has become worse every day, the 23-year-old, who was once a college journalism student, says. We can't stop. We just want to find and bury them. The missing have added layers of pain to Gaza's families, who are overwhelmingly Muslim. Islam calls for the dead to be buried quickly within 24 hours if possible, with the shrouded bodies turned to face the holy city of Mecca. Traditionally, the body is washed by family members with soap and scented water, and prayers for forgiveness are said at the gravesite. Patient dies from kidney failure after dialysis machine stops, UNOCA. A UN agency reports a Palestinian patient has died inside Al Shifa Hospital from kidney failure after his dialysis was stopped. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs UNOCHA previously stated a number of patients using dialysis machines were at high risk of death after fuel shortages crippled the hospital's operation, and they were turned off. The agency says the patient is one of 40, including 3 premature babies, to have died between November 11 to 16 in its latest update. Only 9 of the 35 hospitals in Gaza are partially functioning, according to the Hamas-run Ministry of Health in Gaza. Health concerns also remain a priority in southern shelters. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East reports indices have increased by 35% in the past 2 weeks. It adds cases of diarrhea have increased by about 40%. Palestinian Australian Riyad Al-Adassi won't eat until the people of Gaza eat. Gazan-born Riyad Al-Adassi sits firmly in a blue fold-out camping chair, wearing a Palestinian scarf draped proudly over his shoulders. He's been on a hunger strike for 8 days, and won't eat until the people of Gaza eat. The nature strip just outside the web dock in Port Melbourne has been made into a temporary home for at least 50 protesters. They are camping out to disrupt what they believe are arms shipments to aid Israel in its invasion of Gaza. Read the full story below. US has deep concern over strike on Jordan's field hospital in Gaza. The US Secretary of State has expressed deep concern over a strike on a Jordan field hospital in Gaza that injured 7 people. Antony Blinken spoke by telephone with Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi to share his deep concern for the Jordanian medical personnel injured outside the Jordanian field hospital while providing critical medical care in Gaza, the State Department said on Thursday. Mr. Blinken also reiterated that civilians and medical personnel at hospitals must be protected. Earlier in Washington, State Department spokesman Matthew Miller said, "We don't want to see hospitals struck from the air. We reiterate the obligations under international humanitarian law for all parties to take key precautions to reduce the risk of harm to civilians and all possible steps to mitigate civilian harm," Mr. Miller said. Neither Mr. Miller nor the statement explicitly condemned the strike, or said who was responsible. Jordan's foreign ministry says it is awaiting the results of an investigation to take the necessary legal and political steps against this heinous crime. Reporting with AFP. Photos: how Day 41 of the Israel-Gaza war looks. Victoria Police investigate anti-Semitic graffiti. Victoria Police is investigating after anti-Semitic graffiti was found spray-painted on the letterbox of a unit in Melbourne's southeast. The graffiti appeared sometime after 10 p.m. on Wednesday, on Newport Road, Clayton South. Police say 164 reports of anti-Semitic or Islamophobic incidents have been reported across the state since October 7. 60 of those reports have resulted in an investigation and 15 people have been arrested. There is absolutely no place at all in our society for anti-Semitic or hate-based symbols and behavior, police said in a statement. The graffiti will be removed by the building's body corporate. Palestine draw 0-0 in World Cup qualifier amid conflict. The Israel-Gaza war was all-pervading in Palestine's World Cup qualifier against Lebanon. The team drew 0-0 with Lebanon in a United Arab Emirates game, played without fans. It had been scheduled to be played in Beirut, but Israel's response to the terrorist attack by Hamas on October 7 caused officials to switch the match to Sharjah. The whole Palestinian team wore traditional keffiyeh, checkered black and white scarves, before the national anthems. They stood for a minute's silence for those killed in the conflict before kickoff. Despite starting official training, only 4 days ago, the Palestinians started the game well. Yet Lebanon captain Hassan Martouk had the first chance after 12 minutes, with his long-range shot going wide. Before Atta Gaba responded for the Palestinians with a header on the half-hour mark that went over. The Palestinians usually host games at AA Rames Faisal Al Husseini Stadium on the West Bank, but will meet Australia next in Kuwait on November 21st. Reporting with Reuters. Crowds rally outside US consulate in Melbourne, calling for ceasefire. Reporting by Mike Lorigan in Melbourne. About 200 protesters are gathering outside the US consulate in Melbourne, calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The demonstration has been organized by Students for Palestine. Chants of shame, shame, Biden shame, 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 Labour shame and free Palestine are being heard outside the St Kilda Road Embassy. Victoria Police and Australian Federal Police officers have a visible presence at the rally. Protester Jan Skuld says the US government was cheering on war crimes in Gaza. I'm a Jewish man in Melbourne and I want to say what Israel is doing right now in committing its genocide. It does not stand on the side of Jews when it does that, he says. It actually stands on the side of imperialism, it stands on the side of oppression. Palestine Red Crescent says its team is trapped in AILE Hospital. The Palestine Red Crescent Society PRCS staff are trapped within Theali Baptist Hospital in Gaza City due to surrounding violence. The organization said in a post on X. PRCS Emergency Medical Services teams are still trapped in AILE Hospital, PRCS said. Following an earlier post where it had said the hospital was besieged by Israeli tanks. The PRCS team could hear explosions and intense gunfire in the area, the organization said. There are several casualties in the hospital courtyard about 30 meters away from our teams, but they are unable to reach, it said. No comment was immediately available from the Israeli, military or Gazan officials. The ABC was not able to verify the situation on the ground at this time. There is an ongoing communications outage across the Gaza Strip. On Monday, AILE Hospital was reported to be the sole medical facility in northern Gaza still able to receive patients. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs OCHA. Professor to be charged with involuntary manslaughter after U.S. protest clash. A Southern California college professor has been arrested in the death of a Jewish protester during demonstrations over the Israel-Gaza war. Paul Kessler, 69, died on November 6 following a confrontation the previous day during a pro-Palestinian demonstration in Thousand Oaks near Los Angeles. On Thursday local time, Loy Abdel Fattah El-Naji, 50, was arrested. Ventura County District Attorney Eric Nasrenko says 2 felony charges will be filed against Mr. El-Naji, involuntary manslaughter and battery, each of which carries a maximum penalty of 4 years in prison. Mr. Kessler was among a group of pro-Israel demonstrators who showed up at the event advertised as a peaceful gathering to support Palestinians, officials say. Deputies at the time determined Mr. Kessler fell backward and struck his head on the ground, but that investigators did not have a clear view from video footage of what they describe as a physical altercation between the 2 men before the fall. Mr. El-Naji stayed at the scene and told deputies he had called 911. Investigators say they received conflicting information from witnesses on both sides about what took place. The department did not respond to questions on Thursday from the Associated Press as to whether additional footage or other evidence prompted the charges. The Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles said in a statement that it was grateful for the arrest. This arrest shows that violence towards our Jewish community will not be tolerated, the Federation said. More than 800 Jewish Australians call for ceasefire in Gaza. More than 800 Jewish Australians have signed an open letter urging the government to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. The letter, helmed by the group Jewish Australians for a Ceasefire, says Australia cannot stand by while Israel continues to subject Palestinian civilians to its campaign of collective punishment. As the letter's organizers, we are outraged that some of our Jewish communal leaders are attempting to defend Israel's attacks on hospitals. Alongside Israel's many other acts of cruelty, the group spokesperson says, these communal leaders continue to speak as though they represent our community as a whole on this issue. As our open letter makes clear, this is not the case. Jews are not a monolith. There are tectonic shifts underway in Jewish communities worldwide on this issue, especially among younger Jews. Meanwhile, many of our communal leaders have essentially become spokespeople for the Netanyahu government. The letter has been collecting signatures for weeks and as of November 13 had 815 signatories. A petition with over 40,000 signatures with the same demand from Australian medical professionals wastabled in Parliament Thursday. The Australia/Israel and Jewish Affairs Council AJAC expressed disappointment after Foreign Minister Penny Wong told insiders, "We all want to take the next steps towards a ceasefire." AJAC Executive Director Colin Rubenstein described the comments as disappointing and disturbing. The Zionist Federation of Australia and Executive Council of Australian Jewry said, any ceasefire that does not involve the return of the hostages and the removal of Hamas from power will only entrench Hamas, in light of Ms. Wong's comments. Syrian army says it shot down missiles heading towards Damascus. Syria's army says it shot down missiles fired from the Golan Heights heading towards the capital, Damascus. Most of the missiles were intercepted early on Friday, but some caused material damage, the army says in a statement. The Israeli military declined to comment. Last week, Israel's military said an organization in Syria launched a drone that hit a school in the southern Israeli city of Eilat. It said troops struck the group back in response. Reporting with Reuters. Not successful, Netanyahu on trying to get Gazan civilians out of harm's way. Earlier, we flagged CBS News would be interviewing Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. That interview has just finished, so here's more of what Mr. Netanyahu had to say. Mr. Netanyahu was asked whether Israel's killing of thousands of Palestinians, as it retaliates for Hamas's October 7 terrorist attack, would fuel a new generation of hatred. Any civilian death is a tragedy. And we shouldn't have any because we're doing everything we can to get the civilians out of harm's way. While Hamas is doing everything to keep them in harm's way, Mr. Netanyahu said. So, we send leaflets, we call them on their cell phones, and we say, leave. And many have left. The other thing that I can say is that we'll try to finish that job with minimal civilian casualties. That's what we're trying to do, minimal civilian casualties. But unfortunately, we're not successful. Reporting with Reuters. Monarchists miffed over government house revenue-raising discussions, ABC News. The leader of Tasmania's constitutional monarchy movement is uncomfortable with the possibility of government house raising money from croquet or coffee shops. The annual report of the Governor Kate Warner's office said a 5-10-year plan to generate income streams for government house included hiring out the lawn, tennis and croquet courts, and renting its 3 estate cottages. A discussion paper also raised the prospect of a cafe and gift shop on the grounds of the 1857 sandstone building overlooking Hobart's River Derwent. The state convener of Australians for a Constitutional Monarchy, Reg Watson, said he was uncomfortable with the concept. Government House is inspected by the public, and that's good because the public can understand better the role of the governor, he said. But selling items and a cafe and that, I'm just wondering how would it impinge on the dignity of the House. Mr. Watson said if Government House needed a bigger budget, that was a matter for the state government. Maybe it's just not adequate, and if not, because of the important constitutional role the governor plays. Perhaps it should go back to Al Hodgman and the treasurer, he said. We must maintain, in my opinion, the dignity of the House, that separation. The annual report said income proposals would be considered under existing provisions of the Government House Land Act. Mr. Watson supported the idea of bringing the monarchy closer to the people, but said it could go too far. The royal family, of course, have moved with the times and opened themselves up to a great degree, as has the government here with public inspections. But at the same time, we must maintain, in my opinion, the dignity of the House, that separation, he said. If it becomes too familiar, then I think that respect sometimes becomes diminished. The Governor's Office is also interested in establishing a Friends of Government House Tasmania group and wants more shared arrangements with the Premier's office, particularly in matters of state significance. The office received $3.6 million from the state government last financial year. Government House declined an interview.
Now we're going to go to the Northern Territory, where police are trying to head off a turf war between rival outlaw bikie gangs. Harsh laws in neighbouring states are prompting gangs to move into the territory, leading
Satellite imagery reveals extent of destruction of Commonwealth War graves in Gaza, ABC News. In short, satellite imagery shows heavy damage to the Gaza War Cemetery at Deir el-Billah, which is mainly dedicated to fallen Allied personnel, including more than 250 Australians. The body that normally oversees the cemetery is no longer able to provide updates on its condition, having evacuated its staff from Gaza. What's next? Green Senator David Shoebridge is demanding the Albanese government raise the issue directly with the Israeli government. Dozens of graves belonging to Australian soldiers located inside an historic Gaza cemetery are feared to be damaged or destroyed following Israeli military operations over recent months. Earlier this year, international media reports suggested at least 16 cemeteries had been desecrated during the Israel Defense Forces IDF's ground offensive against Hamas, launched in response to the deadly October 7 terrorist attacks. Recent satellite imagery has revealed the extent of damage to one of the sites, the Gaza War Cemetery at Deir el-Billah, which is mainly dedicated to fallen Allied personnel and is administered by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission (CWGC). The Gaza War Cemetery contains over 3,600 Commonwealth burials, mainly from World War I. Around 260 of the graves are dedicated to Australian soldiers, primarily light horsemen killed in 1917. Now a series of images, produced by Canadian geospatial firm Skywatch, appears to show the Gaza War Cemetery and its surrounds have been heavily damaged. Green Senator David Shoebridge, a vocal critic of Israel's military action who obtained the commercial images, says they reveal a level of destruction and desecration that is dreadfully disturbing. These images, for the first time, show the scale of destruction of Commonwealth war graves in Gaza. And we know that within that cemetery there are some 260 Australian war graves, Senator Shoebridge said. The revelation of the extent of damage to Commonwealth war graves comes just weeks after pro-Palestinian activists vandalized numerous memorials along Canberra's Anzac Parade in protest of the conflict in Gaza. The Greens refused to condemn that vandalism in the Senatelia this month, with Senator Jordan Steele John saying, "Painting is a form of free speech." Australia yet to raise concerns with Israeli military. In May, the CWGC issued a statement saying its staff had been safely evacuated from Gaza, noting its cemeteries had suffered damage. But the extent is currently unknown and vowing to restore the sites when circumstances allow. During a parliamentary hearing earlier this month, the Department of Veterans Affairs (DVA) confirmed it had not made any inquiries to the Israeli government about the grave's possible destruction. Under questioning from Senator Shoebridge, the Deputy Secretary Alison McLaren said the department was instead receiving its information from the CWGC, but had not had any additional updates since March. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission look after all war graves in Gaza, including the Australian war graves, she said. As such, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission will make an assessment when they're able to get into the site. Senator Shoebridge is now demanding the Albanese government raise concerns directly with Israel about the possible damage to Australian graves. "I find it extraordinary they haven't made the most basic inquiries about whether or not Australian war graves have been destroyed," he said. "Because what you can see from these satellite images is that the scale of the destruction is widespread, and it's been evident for months and months." The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs estimates at least 38,000 Palestinians have been killed since Israel launched retaliatory military operations against Hamas for its October 7th attack, which killed 1,200 people. The Greens have accused the federal government of not doing enough to condemn the casualties.
I'm gonna head off. The whole world's corrupt. They don't want to stop it. God needs to come. Technology advance. Australia, 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 Australia. I love you.